The talk for this morning is Tarot and the Guiding Star. And as you know, the star is up there to your left. That beautiful picture called the Star, where we see the lovely Isis, one of her many names. I think of her also as a very specialized aspect of Elohim, which she is. We see her kneeling with one knee on the ground and supporting herself with a foot on the waters. This is very, very, very symbolic and important, as I think we will see. And we see her pouring the waters of consciousness from two vases. One obviously is being dipped from the pool and being poured back, or has been dipped from the pool at some point and is being poured back. And the other pouring the waters from the pool onto the ground, going into 5 areas, actually symbolizing the use of the 5 senses on and in the physical portion of our consciousness, or our capacity to experience livingness via the senses is being shown as taking place on the ground again, symbolizing Malkuth, the kingdom. But we have here something simultaneous taking place, and the simultaneous aspect holds a message, a secret message, which I hope we'll all be able to share together this morning. The stars are another aspect that we want to pay very strict attention to, especially when you consider that the name of the tarot key itself is the star, yet here we see more than one star. However, I think you will notice that the major star is golden, and the other stars are a different color. They're white or silver. Now, in actuality, that golden star, of course, symbolizes Tiferet, beauty, the sphere of the activity of the sun, and it is relating to that most vital aspect of our being, the one ego seated in the hearts of men. It is also indicating the fact that it is this one ego seated in the hearts of men, this golden star, that is the true livingness, and as the true livingness, it is the true support or the true guide of our being or our sojourning through the 5 senses of consciousness, and always incidentally returning back to the pool in its special whirls. Now let's take a little more of the interaction of these meanings, especially as it relates to some of the things we heard from the Book of Tokens. If you will remember, in the Book of Tokens it mentions that Sadi is the hook. Now that, or the fish hook incidentally, is what it relates to. Sadi is the name of the letter on this tarot key. And if you will recall, it talks about the fish hook being thrown into the waters or cast into the waters. And that the casting into the waters of the fish hook is meant to catch the fish. And it mentions death. We must die to our old selves. Now, if you'll take a look at tarot key number 13, Death, I'd like to remind you that the letter, the Hebrew letter here, Nun, means fish. So that what the figure in the star is doing, basically, is fishing, and she's fishing for this fish. Now, that seems a strange thing to be looking for, doesn't it? For death? But wait a minute. What do we mean by death? One of the most important meanings of Tarot Key 13 is change. And what is change? The dissolution of what came in order to have what comes next. If we hang on to what was, we aren't able to get what is, let alone what is to be. So that dissolution of what was is a very important, in fact, it is the most important aspect involved in being able to receive that which is really meant by true guidance. Now, guidance is the result of meditation, and meditation is one of the primary meanings of Tarot Key 17, the star. Also, it is called one of the other meanings that deal with meditation has to do with realization. Revelation is a word used in Kabbalah for this particular meaning. And also we are being told that fishing, learning how to fish properly into the waters of consciousness, is what is necessary in order to land the fish. That is, to be able to enter into whatever understanding of change must take place in order to have the true answer to our meditation, the true guidance in our lives. Now, I think all of us will grant that our greatest problems have come to us as a result of hanging on to an idea, a concept, an emotion, a misinterpretation, or a condition. And we have pretty much been like children crying, wanting to have our cake and eat it too. In other words, we have wanted solutions to problems that have come. But what have we done? While we have been seeking for solutions, while we have even wept for the solutions, while we have been swept with anguish, while we have walked in tearfulness, calling out to God or something to help us, to guide us. At the same time, if we have learned to analyze the full state of our condition, I think most of us will have arrived at least this much of a true revelation, and that is that even while we've been crying out for help in various states of sorrow, anguish, test and trial, there's been some portion of our consciousness, of our emotions, that have continued to hang on to a particular trait, which sometimes we've called it an integral part of our personality, or we may have called it our own integrity, for example. I know I used to call my prejudices my integrity once, because I didn't recognize them as prejudices, and so I was able to stand very haughtily, to feel that complete sense of self-righteousness, to be able to say, well, the one thing I will not do is give up my integrity. Of course, you all know the story of my beautiful, beloved other half, who also got on his high horse, but this for philosophical reasons, where he insisted he had such integrity that no one could ever buy him. And you surely all know it by now, because I love to brag about it. I bought him for $2 at the marriage bureau. He forgot his wallet. And I remind him regularly. And he loves to be reminded. If I don't remind him, he'll remind me, because he loves to tell of it. But we all do know that our tendency is to misinterpret our own thinkings of the past, our own feelings of the past. Our tendency is an attempt at hanging on to what we are. We're not willing to die to our old selves. And this really is the basis of the vast portion of our problems. So that fishhook is an extraordinarily good term for the letter that also has to do with revelation. And fish is a fantastic symbolic word for the idea that has to do with ability or capacity to accept the death, that has to do with change. You see, we are so identified usually with our old thinkings, our old feelings, our old patterns, that we think we are what we have thought, that we are what we have felt, that we are what we have interpreted, usually misinterpreted. And the result is that we fight for what we think is our survival. And we have a subconscious fear of the complete death of our personality or our individuality or the uniqueness of our being, unless we hang on to those portions of our being which we think have basically been us. And therein lies the problem, of course. Because, as a matter of fact, we can never experience anything new unless we are ready to let whatever is old pass us by. In other words, we cannot try on a new dress unless we're ready to take off an old dress, or a new suit unless we're willing to take off the old suit. We cannot experience a new taste sensation unless we're willing to put aside some of the older taste sensations. You know, my gorgeous beloved other half, although he adores taste sensations, he also loves to taste the same thing over and over again because he very easily falls into what some people call grooves. And so I very lovingly, expressing the Elohim, I assure you it's the Elohim, whatever anyone may think, and knowing that we owe it to the Yod-He-Vav-He Elohim to let this divine experience all of the extraordinary uniqueness of the subtleties in and through us. Knowing this, why I very lovingly push my beloved other half. Now mind you, I do it lovingly. I push my other half out of his groove into the adventure of new tastes, so that as a result of this, he hasn't fought too hard, you understand, just enough to keep things and make life interesting. But the result has been that he has all sorts of new taste sensations open to him, which the Lord of the universe could not have had he remained stuck in that one groove. I hope God's grateful, incidentally, you know, because if there are things that I need to have overlooked, perhaps if I offer the Lord of the universe all these extra sensations via my beloved ones that have been dedicated and given over to the divine, perhaps some of the other elements will not be looked upon so sternly. I really know better, you know. It's just that I like to have fun with God, since I know God has fun with us. It's a sort of interacting type of experience. But in essence, our emotional problems, our material problems, our problems in relationships, all of these problems stem from not being able to, not being willing to die. That is, to permit the old to pass away, to be willing to reap from the old. As you can see here, we have the reaper, and it's not a grim reaper, incidentally. It's not grim at all. It may look grim, but the appearance is there only because this is what we fear in our own hearts. But what is actually being reaped here, as I've pointed out to you before, is the wisdom of the Divine Father, seen there, wearing the crown, the understanding of the Divine Mother, seen there on the opposite. We see the hands, and hands, incidentally, indicate very important things. First of all, good works. Because, by their works he shall know them. So that's one of the things. Reaping the reward of good works. Also, Yod represents hand, the open hand. And Yod is the hermit. The hermit. And you notice what the hermit is doing. The hermit is holding out the light, giving. The hermit is absolutely giving completely of the light attained, the wisdom attained. There's this generosity, this lovingness, this compassion, this givingness. And that is the meaning of that open hand. Also, there's another hand that is leaning downward, which has the same meaning symbolically as the hand that's closed in a fist. And that has to do with tarot key number 10. And you notice that's the Wheel of Fortune. But it has to do with tarot key number 10 in a very special way. The ability and the capacity to grasp. We grasp something. The comprehension, the grasping, has to do then with the ability to reap from our old experiences, our experiences of yesterday, to reap comprehension, understanding, wisdom, the comprehension that gives us the ability and the capacity to move on. And you have a tarot key that is involved with motion in key 10, you'll notice. Most people think it just has to do with being able to have good fortune on the material plane, like, for example, plenty of money. But, of course, those of us who are on the path of return are learning how to understand values more fully, are learning how to understand that only those who are able to develop the true and eternal wealth, that is the richness of spirit, the wealth that has to do with understanding experience, the wealth that has to do with being grateful for every single experience of the past, whatever it may be, the wealth of being able to say thank you, God, for every tear as well as every joy, for every betrayal as well as every bit of loyalty, for anything and everything. This is the wealth. This, as a matter of fact, is the only true wealth. And those who gain this wealth never need to worry about going hungry on the material plane, because that which is within will inevitably and inexorably manifest on the without. That's one of the meanings of the key, the guiding star here, because we are being shown that the balancing between the waters of consciousness and that which is manifest is there. The waters are being poured from both hands. Now this is there whether we know it consciously or not. The within state of being manifests in the without, whether we are ignorant of it or whether we know about it, whether we accept it or whether we reject the idea. As you know, truth, surely you have realized that truth is truth, whether people believe it is or not. Reality is reality, whether we believe in it or not. Delusion is delusion, and no amount of believing in delusion will make delusion reality. Reality is. And the only way we can consciously become aware of the true guiding star and walk in this true riches is to work at helping ourselves to understand this very point. Because you see, one of the other very important and basic meanings in relation to key 17 is truth. truth. Now, what is truth? That's a very important thing to know. What is truth? And what is reality? And how many of us can say, I want truth? That sounds very abstract, doesn't it? But we're going to make it very unabstract very quickly. How many of us can say, really and truly, I want truth? How many of us can say, really and truly, I want reality? How many of us can say from the very depth of our soul, I want to be aware of what is, no matter what? No matter what. I want to be aware of what is. Now, inasmuch as we are all spiritual aspirants together, certainly we all have a part of our being that yearns for reality, that yearns for truth. We all very definitely have that. But you see, our problem comes in because though one side of us wants this reality, wants this truth, there is this other side, this side that is usually more unconscious rather than conscious, this part of us that has and holds patterns deep within its being, this part that is not able to accept reality because it is unwilling to face it. We are, or we have the problem of being unable to face the truth about ourselves, that is, about our personality selves, as well as our divine selves, incidentally. How many of us can really accept deep in the depth of our soul, how many of us can really accept the fact and the reality that says, I am a center of expression for the primal will to good? Now, we say it, we recite it on the trestle board, but how many of us feel it as the core and depth of our being, the reality of it? I am a center of expression for the primal will to good, which eternally creates and sustains the universe. In this tarot key, we are watching, creating, and sustaining at the same time. Right there, symbolically expressed. But how many of us actually accept that as a fact within ourselves? And I, now not something else, but I, that in me which is I. Now we, as I said, we give lip service to much, but we're not able to feel or accept in totality certain aspects. Why? Because at least a portion of our being, though we may not know or realize it consciously, there's a portion of our being that is still lost in the illusions and the delusions, the misinterpretations, the patterns that we have not permitted to die, that we have been keeping alive. And how do we keep these patterns alive? Notice on the Kabbalistic tree of life, incidentally, that the star, key 17, connects victory, which is the desire nature and the feeling nature, to foundation, which is the subconscious part of the mind. It holds the patterns. It is the astral field of activity that has to do with the same idea, foundation. And remember, patterns, subconscious patterns, are the foundation for our outer life, which is symbolized by the kingdom. So that it is the patterns of subconsciousness that automatically become the foundation for whatever happens to us outside. And I mean for whatever happens outside. It doesn't matter what it is. Now, these patterns of subconsciousness, which are the real foundations, of course, do not involve only the personal life. This is true. We share this with all life. So there's a part of our experience which has to do with the patterns of the race mind. True. But in our own immediate interacting circle, in the personalized aspect of our lives, we have a continuous manifestation, as shown in the tarot key, and certainly in what is connected on the tree. We have a continuous manifestation of this principle. Now, for example, say we yearn for love. Now, everyone wants to be loved. Everyone. And there isn't anyone who can say they don't want to be loved. Now, but does everyone want to have the complete capacity to love? You know, most of us, when we weep, what we're weeping for is the desire to have others love us, or others to serve us, or others to give to us. That is usually what happens. See the desire nature, victory. This is what usually happens in our consciousness, if you'll stop to analyze it. How many of us weep, symbolically speaking and actually speaking, one way and the other in both, saying, God, dear God, give me the capacity to love. God, dear God, help me to become aware of anything and everything in me that obstructs my capacity to love. God, Lord of the universe, let me see the realities in me of that which is unlovable. And help me to see it. I want reality. I want truth. Help me to see it, not in horror, not in a negative manner, where I'll just put my attention on it, thereby feeding my life essence into it, and therefore forcing it to manifest again and again and again. But help me to see it only so that I will be able to see and know what it is that must die. That must die in order that I can be born again in the reality, in the truth, in the peace. Because do you notice how peaceful Tarot Key 17 is? And when we really know ourselves to be guided by the star, the one thing I'm sure we'll all agree to is that it would be inevitable that we walk in peace. Storms can be about us. Thunder can roar and lightning can strike. Waters can wash and they can flood. But when we know that we are being guided by the star, it can thunder and roar and strike. The core in the depth of the soul is at peace. And that peace is attainable only when we learn how to walk with a conscious recognition of this guidance. And a conscious recognition of this guidance we can have only when and as we train ourselves to want reality, to want truth. You know, even those sometimes who enter into occultism are not entering for the proper reasons. They want to prove something rather than to have reality. I remember shortly before I was finally guided by that star to our beloved and revered Dr. Paul Foster Case. I remember then I was being given some special instruction by someone who certainly was somewhat of an adept, not as great an adept as Dr. Case, but he was an adept. And he was teaching me some very important methods of meditation. But before he entered into this very powerful aspect of it with me, he asked me, he said, "What is it that you're searching for? What do you want?" I said, "I want to know whatever is. I want reality." He said, "Well," he said, "what is it that reality would be to you?" I said, "If I knew what it would be, I would be preconditioning it. My mind is absolutely open." He said, "Are you sure?" I said, yes. I said, all I know is I have to find out, is there a God? I said, now I know it is said there is, it is taught there is, but I don't know it. I don't know it not unless I experience it. So I can't say there's a God. He said, all right. He said, now what I want to ask you is this. Suppose in your work, in your meditations, now I'm teaching you to go through, suppose you would find out that there is no God. What then? I thought a moment. I said, marvelous. Then I'd know. He said, you are ready to receive any and every bit of instruction. You are beyond self-delusion. You don't have to prove anything. You're open to reality. You are open to truth. Now see, it may sound strange to you, the idea of my being willing to, if it were reality, the idea that if there were no God, I would be very happy, at least I know, as though if one could really know such a thing. But this is a philosophical concept I'm giving you, but it has great implications. Because take this basic idea, I just had to know what is, not what do I want. Of course, in truth, I didn't care at that time whether there was or wasn't a God. If there wasn't, I figured fine, then you can get out of pain. If life gets too tough, you take a bunch of sleeping tablets and go into eternal extinction, and what could be nicer than that? You know, no more problems. That may sound like a strange attitude, but it had its logic for me of that time and that age. Remember, I was very young. Very young. You see, now I've achieved the age where I'm almost 21, next birthday. But then, you know, when we're so very young, we walk in very strange areas and worlds and to do some strange things and have some strange thoughts and attitudes. So that was my attitude, but the point is, I wanted reality. And therefore, when I finally went through my intensive meditation, I experienced reality. I was willing for whatever is to be. Now, of course, the truth of the matter is, my love, is that whatever is, whether we are willing or not. And so I think it's a very good idea for us all to decide, inasmuch as reality is going to be whether I want it so or not, I might as well start wanting it, since it isn't going to do me any good whatsoever to hang on to delusion or lies or snares. You see, it's pretty much like saying, since I'm going to have to walk in the divine will, I might as well say, God, all I want's the divine will. In other words, if you can't lick them, join them. One of the statements that has been made so often. All right, then. Let's consider, what is it within our own hearts, within our own souls, that usually goes on and has been going on? Of course, the hanging on to these patterns of the past is something that we have done out of ignorance. This is true. But if we want to be cured of ignorance, then we are able more clearly to start seeing, because all the help of the universe really starts to pour in to help us to see. Now, when I meditated in order to find out, is there a God, I found out not only that there's a God, but that I was it. That is, not just I, not I am. I am, which is as much you as me and all things that are. I found this out, and then I knew that at least there's something in me. There's that portion of me that was before time began, that will be when time ceases to be. Never a time it was not, beginningless, endless, alwayness. And it was rapture and beauty and glory and all things lovely, and it was peace. It was certainly peace. And then when I meditated, but it was important to me, you see, it was a question that was important. When I meditated on other aspects of life, evolution, pain, because I was pretty horrified at the idea of all creatures having to die, you see. And remember, you have to be willing to die, as shown in the Tarot Key series and their meanings, in order to be open to reality. I was horrified at the idea that every creature was subject to pain and that death took place inevitably and invariably, and so that everything that lived was sort of doomed to experience some kind of pain, and certainly death, and how everything just fought to hang on to its life. I cared about the answer, and I meditated on that. And so when I meditated, I had got my answer. But how did I receive my answer? I received it by becoming that answer. And this is the acme, incidentally, of what can happen in meditation when we are willing to have reality. And interestingly enough, in the answer that had to do with death, the important thing was that from that level, which was and is the principle of evolution, from that level of consciousness, there was absolutely no concern whatsoever with the dying that takes place. It was as unimportant, while I was in that state of consciousness, pain, it was as unimportant as it's unimportant to us, say, if we drop just a little piece of rubbish on the street. Though in a way, I guess that should be important, because it would be, we're dirtying up the scenery. But I can't remotely tell you how insignificant and unimportant it is in that level. And when I returned to the and consciousness, having experienced this level, what I recognized was that within the reality of all of livingness, within the reality of evolution, the pain that comes is because of this hanging and clinging, that actually death is not what it seems. It was change, and that all of evolution required change, and that it was our misinterpretation of change, so that what we consider the larger death, like when a person dies and goes to their just reward, let's hope upstairs, Of course, there really isn't any downstairs in the sense people think, but it seems like it. But what I came to realize with all my heart was that it was our delusion about change and death which was the problem, and our unwillingness to face the realities, that combination. Given the willingness to have reality no matter what, there is the most extraordinary gate. You remember in the Book of Tokens how it mentions, I am the gate, I am the hook, I am the fish. In other words, the truth of the matter is that the gate of our own inside consciousness opens up to us and brings us the light and the guidance, as long as we train ourselves to be willing to know the reality and permit the changes and help the changes to take place. So, in essence, if we are able to look into our own hearts, and we have to do this, even that has to be done with the fish hook, the fish hook of that beautiful sati. And we're able to say, well, now if I am living in such a way that I feel I haven't got love, then certainly one thing is for sure. The place I have to go to work is the inside, because that is what is always the foundation for outside. The sure thing is then I've got to work at developing my own love nature. If I am deluded and think I have a perfected love nature, whereas I really haven't, the outside should wake me up. And if it isn't, you know what'll happen? Over and over again, I'm going to find myself in relationships where I'm rejected. Over and over, I'm going to find myself in relationships where I'm misunderstood. And over, I'm going to find myself stuck, absolutely stuck in the pattern. And this is what has happened to all of us and happens to all of us. However, when, on the other hand, we make up our minds that what? I haven't got enough love on the outside? Then what I'm going to have to do is let the spirit of love, which is God, live more completely, deeply, and fully in my heart, in my soul. When we become more concerned with that, the miracles talk about the star, the guiding star. Oh, no words can explain it. If we find that we are lonely in the outer world, we better look in our hearts and say, what? I'm lonely? It must be that I am selfish within the core of my soul, though I haven't recognized it in myself, because only selfish beings are really lonely in the truest, most complete sense of the word. And furthermore, it must be that I don't know how to be a true friend, not a complete friend. Because a true friend, a complete friend, accepts the totality of the other. True love, complete love, accepts the totality of the other, not in a deluded way. In other words, let's say I look at you. I'm looking at you. Now, if I have to see your personality as being perfected in order to love you, and boy, darlings, we're all in trouble. And we're in real trouble. Didn't Jesus say, call no man good but the Father? And what do we mean by perfected personality, pray tell? Now, if I love to crack jokes, and somebody who takes their aspirations seriously and hasn't got a sense of humor, I take mine very seriously too. So seriously that I have to crack jokes or I'd fall apart. You know, but if somebody else feels that the only way aspiration can be proven to be serious is to march around with a knit brow, you know, and the eyes slanted upward to show that they're looking to the above and the beyond, with the proper position, if this is the manner in which the aspiration can be shown, that person is going to look upon my personality as being very lacking and unspiritual and wonder how such a person could be a spiritual teacher. And they won't make any bones about talking about it to others too, because we always feel more important when we can tear somebody else apart, especially if they appear to be in a place of what they think is prestige, you know. Because then it helps us feel that much more important. And what we're really doing, though, really we're rending our own souls. Because you see, there is no such thing as separation. And that's the thing we discover when we become willing to see reality. And we discover that if we're criticizing anyone else's personality, what we're really doing is tearing our heart into shreds. And if we are gossiping about another, we are really destroying our own love nature. And if we have to find the faults in other personalities, we are really strengthening the demons inside ourselves, the demons that are self-made. Because that's where our attention is, my loves. Where your attention is, there goes your life power. There goes your life essence. Where your attention is, there goes the full evolutionary creativity of life itself. All of the power of the universe goes where your attention goes. And the secret of meditation is the secret of attention, focusing on that which we really care about. When we care about tearing others apart, we are torn apart. You see, the desire nature, that is the victorious thing at all times. If we have to blame somebody out there for any of our problems, then our life beingness, the attention of the life essence of the universe, is focusing on blame, and everything returns home, and we're thrusting the knife into our own hearts in that manner. And so even if it were for no other reason than to learn how to be practical. You know, after all, why remain a masochist, for God's sake? And I mean for God's sake literally, not figuratively. Because there's one being. If we want to lift the pain of life, the first place to start is with yourself. There is no other place. To lift the pain out of our own hearts requires that we develop within ourselves, that we work upon the portion of our being that requires it. In other words, place the life power of attention inside, because everything starts from in there and projects from there, from the pool, from the waters. Place it inside. Practice accepting other personalities. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to approve of the conduct that is unevolved. But there's a big difference between noting a child throwing a tantrum, and yet loving the child and accepting the child, or condemning, sitting in judgment and deciding out and away and thrusting the child out of your life. And furthermore, we all are lonely, wanting to be accepted totally. Totally. If we don't recognize it, we'd better get busy and want reality. You know, I make no bones about that. You remember, I've mentioned to you, I'm a very reasonable soul, very reasonable. And God knows when I'm reasonable, I'm really reasonable. And I keep trying to tell you too. Well, for example, what are my expectations? Thoroughly reasonable. In my other half, in my beautiful, gorgeous, glorious man, I don't expect much. All I expect, as you know, is his heart, soul, mind, body, and spirit. Now, if there are any other vehicles, and I'm just ignorant of them, believe me, I'm including them right now. I don't want any ignorance to make me stumble. Now, you say, is that spiritual? Why not? I accept the totality of him. I accept, and when I say I expect it, I wouldn't expect it if I didn't have it. Now there's another secret, if you know how to listen. We only say I expect the way I just said it when we know we really have it. And we know we really have it when we know we really give it. And that's the next secret. Give it. Are you able to give this kind of love, this total acceptance to another? Then what right have you to expect it yet? Isn't it better to get busy, to learn how to give and be? This is the secret of the fish and the hook and the unity of life. This is the secret of attaining reality. This is the secret of real meditation. The truth of the fact is, my loves, that you are always in meditation. There isn't a moment you are not in meditation. Whatever your attention is on is an automatic state of meditation. Whatever your attention is upon, and you're feeding it with emotion, whatever the emotion, positive or negative, you are in meditation. You are in meditation if you are knitting your brows and saying, how dare that dirty, low-down, good-for-nothing so-and-so treat me that way? Whoa! Boy, I tell you, other low-down, good-for-nothings are going to do it better and better. Treating you that way. When you feed an image like that with that much power, the desire, that's meditation. Subconsciousness builds, is the foundation that receives, and out it flows into the five senses of our world. So, to understand meditation in its essence is to know that we'd better learn to be in the spiritual level of the meditative state every single instant. And let me tell you, it's a lot easier to develop that than to walk in sorrow, disillusionment, misery, loneliness, and despair. It's much easier to train our minds and hearts to wake up and say, good morning, God, I love you, looking first into yourself and then outside, and looking into the eyes of your beloved other half, if you have the good fortune to have one, and if not, then into the eyes of the beloved half that you're attracting to yourself, or hoping to, and hope God will bring it soon, and say, good morning, beloved, wherever you are. I'm expecting you as soon as I'm able to love you firmly enough to get the kind of love that will return. And you say, and good morning, sky and star and breeze, I love you. Good morning, friend, and bee. Good morning, blade of grass. Good morning, livingness of life. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you.